If you're running a Signal K server on your boat to manage your navigation data, you might want to pull into the nearest port and check your patches. A critical flaw was just disclosed that lets unauthenticated attackers steal authentication tokens and basically take over the hub.
I'm Melody. That's Alec. Let's break it down.
So, Signal K. It's that open source data standard for boats. It's great for connecting GPS, wind sensors, engine data, all into one central dashboard. But this flaw is a nasty piece of work. It's got a CVSS of 9.1.
Wait, Signal K. Isn't that the one used by a lot of DIY sailors and even some commercial setups to bridge NMEA 2000 data? I remember seeing it on some marine tech forums. If someone gets into that hub, they aren't just seeing the data, they're potentially seeing the boat's entire nervous system.
Exactly. The vulnerability is actually a chain of two features. First, there's an unauthenticated WebSocket request enumeration. Basically, an attacker can ask the server what's going on without proving who they are. Then, they pair that with a flaw in how the server polls for access requests. The end result is they can sniff out JWT authentication tokens.
And once you have the token, you're the captain. But seriously, Alec, the description also mentions convincing social engineering. It looks like attackers can inject their own descriptions into access requests. So an admin might see a pop-up saying, System Update or GPS Calibration, and click Allow without realizing it's a trap.
Right. It's a classic case of technical flaws meeting human psychology. If you're using this, you need to be on version 2.19.0 or later. Anything earlier is a sitting duck, especially if that server is exposed to the internet. Which, let's be honest, a lot of remote monitoring setups are.
It's that maritime security gap again. We saw something similar with shipboard routers last year. People forget that a boat is just a floating office network these days. Speaking of taking over accounts, did you see the WordPress plugin issue? Branda?
Yeah, there's a privilege escalation flaw in the Branda plugin, which is used for white labeling and rebranding WordPress dashboards. It has a high severity score.
Branda. That's by WPMU Dev, right? They're a huge developer. This isn't some tiny obscure plugin. The irony is that people use Branda to make their site look more professional and secure. And now it's the front door for an account takeover.
The flaw is pretty blunt. It doesn't properly validate a user's identity before letting them update a password. So, an unauthenticated attacker can just send a request to change the password for any user, including the site administrator.
That's incredibly basic. We're still seeing missing identity validation in 2025? It reminds me of those old IDOR vulnerabilities, where you just change the user ID in the URL and suddenly you're someone else. If you're running Branda, what's the safe version?
You need to be past version 3.4.25. If you haven't updated in the last few days, your admin account is essentially up for grabs. Moving on, we have a bit of a ghost ship situation with some networking gear.
Wait, let me guess. No vendor response?
Spot on. We have multiple CVEs affecting some routers. These are critical buffer overflows in the stow story act function across multiple files like form remote control and form FTP server.
Buffer overflows in the remote control and FTP functions. That is a nightmare. And you said the exploit is public? If the vendor isn't responding, these devices are basically ticking time bombs. It's like those old Soho routers we used to see being recruited into the Mirai botnet.
Exactly. Attackers can trigger these remotely. And that's not the only one. We're seeing a massive dump of SQL injection flaws in YAML KSOA. There are at least 7 or 8 CVEs here, all hitting version 9.
YAML is huge in the ERP and office automation space in Asia. This feels like a researcher just did a grep for vulnerable parameters and hit the jackpot. Agent works del.jsp, deluser.jsp. It's everywhere. And again, Alec, I'm seeing vendor was contacted but did not respond in the notes.
It's a pattern today. Same with Empire CMS and a project called WASM Decompile. When the maintainers are gone or silent, the exploits just sit there in the public domain. It's a buffet for anyone looking to build a botnet or pivot into a corporate network.
It really highlights the risk of using abandonware in your stack. If the person who wrote the code isn't answering the phone, you're the one holding the bag when a CVSS 8.8 drops. Speaking of being left holding the bag, did you see the report on Fortinet firewalls? This one is frustrating.
You're talking about the 10,000 firewalls still exposed to that 5-year-old two-factor bypass? Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
5 years, Alec. This isn't some 0 day. This is a vulnerability from 2019. We're talking about a flaw that lets someone bypass 2FA to get into the SSL VPN. BleepingComputer is reporting that over 10,000 devices are still showing up on Shodan as vulnerable.
It's the set it and forget it mentality. People put these firewalls at the edge of their network, they work for years, and they never get touched. But the attackers haven't forgotten. We're seeing active exploitation right now. If you're an admin and you haven't audited your FortiOS versions lately, you're basically leaving the backdoor unlocked with a sign that says, 2FA is just for show.
It reminds me of the Avanti mess from last year. These edge devices are the most critical part of your perimeter, yet they seem to be the hardest to keep updated. Maybe because people are scared an update will break the VPN and lock everyone out?
That's usually the fear. But at this point, the risk of a breach is way higher than the risk of a configuration error. And speaking of long-term risks, there's a fascinating and terrifying update on the LastPass breach from 2022.
This story is like a slow-motion car crash. TRM Labs is saying that cryptocurrency thefts happening right now are being traced back to those encrypted vaults stolen over 2 years ago. Alec, this is exactly what we feared when the breach first happened, that attackers would just sit on the vaults and brute force them at their leisure.
Exactly. If you had a weak master password back in 2022, your vault is essentially an open book now. The attackers are draining wallets and laundering the money through Russian exchanges. It's a reminder that encrypted doesn't mean permanently safe. It just means safe for now, depending on your password strength.
I hope people who used LastPass back then didn't just change their master password, but actually moved their sensitive data, especially seed phrases and private keys, to entirely new accounts. If you just changed the lock but left the jewelry in the safe, and they already took the safe home, well, the new lock doesn't matter.
Right. The data is static. It's a snapshot in time. One last piece of news before we go. Covenant Health. They've updated their numbers on a breach from last May.
Nearly 480,000 patients now. That's a huge jump from the initial estimates. This feels like the Change Healthcare fallout all over again. Healthcare data is just so valuable on the dark web because it's permanent. You can change a credit card, but you can't change your medical history or your social security number.
And the delay is what gets me. The breach was discovered in May, and here we are, months later, still finding out how deep the hole goes. If you're in the healthcare sector, the target on your back isn't getting any smaller. Top priority today. If you're managing WordPress, update the Branda plugin to 3.4.25 immediately. It is a literal keys to the kingdom flaw.
If this saved you time, subscribe and hit the bell. We're here every morning.
Stay patched, stay paranoid.